For the first Sunday in March, you've found the Georgia Gang. Topping our agenda today, Atlanta is united in a brand new way. Down at the state capitol, it's a sprint to the end of the legislative session, and that City Hall scandal just bubbles right along. Some of the stories up for grabs on the Georgia Gang.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
And we're glad you could be with us on this Sunday as we emerge from the cold into the warmth of the spring. We're going to get to the Atlanta City Hall scandal in just a moment, but the real action at the moment is at the state capitol, where a crossover day has occurred and where the General Assembly now gets serious about what it will pass into law. So, Phil, I'll begin with you, the now 3-year-old story of casinos. We had essentially buried the casino bill a week ago when it failed in a State House committee.
The Senate committee.
And then come Friday, crossover day, the day when legislation's got to get from one house to the other, an attempt was made to bring it back through the Regulated Industries Committee. We don't know how that turned out, but we can at least tell our viewers that casino gambling is not yet dead.
Well, there was one last attempt, as you're pointing out, Friday at noon, and of course we tape right when that was happening, so we don't know, as you say. Representative Ron Stevens of Savannah was the House author. It's very similar to what State Senator Brandon Beach was doing, and as you alluded to, it died a week ago with the two, as they call it, destination resort casinos in the state. And it really was very similar to the beach legislation. I'm going to look in the crystal ball. I'm not sure that the votes are there, but I could be wrong. But it'll be back next year for sure.
Right. I think they're going to continue to try until they get it through. One way or the other.
I will say this, I think the strategy was off. You know, you have to have two pieces of legislation for a constitutional amendment, and Jeff's laughing because I think you'd agree with me on this. Maybe they should have done the constitutional amendment first, and then not gotten all mixed up in the enabling legislation, which gets very specific, how much goes to
I got a better idea.
So,
they've got an army of lobbyists, so you'd think that they'd have the
able to
ideal
figure it out.
strategy.
That's right.
Yeah, raise
Would
your
you
hand.
agree with me on the strategy?
Right.
Yeah.
Raise your hand if you're not getting a cut from the casino entry.
Well, and you know what happened? You had all these senators commit themselves to this bill, and now they're left hanging.
Right.
Well, even if it did get out of Regulated Industries on Friday, I don't think that the votes are there in the House and Senate to pass it because it requires 2/3 because it's enabling a constitutional amendment.
It is, but golly,
And
come on, why not give the people an opportunity to vote on this? That's all the legislature really has to do. They don't have to legalize casino gambling,
See, that would have been
but
the
they give it to the voters and allow the voters to decide on their own. That needs to be the message.
Here's a simple way. Raise the tax rate. Raise the rate of the gambling take that will go to Hope scholarships and other state needs.
You know, I think
other
a lot of
states
people
set that rate
really,
a lot higher.
A lot of people were really, kind of startled at this 20% rate. You got states out there taking 40, 50%
I think it's
of
60
these
in Maryland.
revenues. Why are we settling for 20? So
Well, that's
maybe
what
if
hit
it comes
me late
back,
in the process.
Right.
All right, well, let's change the subject to the rest of the stuff that's, and you know, we talk about this every year on the broadcast. We've been doing this a long time. It's almost impossible to predict what's going to move and what's not. But now that crossover day has occurred, we can zero in on a few measures, and we'll try to group them. I think, first of all, for me, the biggest one we didn't anticipate, and that comes out of the State House, and that is easy passage of a bill now sent to the Senate that effectively creates a flat rate income tax in the state of Georgia. To a conservative like me, who's been writing about conservative stuff for so many years, this is nirvana. 5.7%. Everybody pays it. Cool, we're out of here.
Well, that's right, and it had some bipartisan support, and it was on the agenda. So we'll see what happens with that. That did come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
It was just a big surprise.
And before you two can even say a word, let me point out that this flat rate income tax for the state of just under 6%, 6% now, is the highest rate. This one has built-in protections for the poor in the form of a tax credit. which you all have supported
Yeah.
in the past.
Well, yeah, that's the only way that you can really, deal with sort of the regressivity of a flat sales tax. And we've seen that model proposed on the federal level as well. It's just never gone anywhere.
Well,
Right, and the danger there for the protection is that they will eventually increase it every year, every year, every year.
all right, the House last week passed Earl Earhart's bill that changes the procedures for sexual assaults on campus. It requires more police involvement and less involvement of Title IX bureaucrats, of people whose only training is in diversity and inclusion. If it's sexual assault, someone has broken the law. Police need to investigate it. I like Earhart's bill.
Well, and this is a national problem too. I think we're taking the lead in this. Yes, the police should be investigating and not just university administrators, because this has been, and there's testimony to this effect, this has been very, very bad for people who are accused falsely, especially males on campuses. And there's been cases here of male students whose whole career has been ruined by accusations, and all of a sudden a university administrator kicks them out, and they're branded for life. And so, yes, you're right. Let's leave this to law enforcement and the courts.
You know, some
Well-
of you majored in human resources and diversity and inclusion and all this other 21st century gobbledygook is not qualified to pursue criminal cases of rape and sexual assault.
Well, it's not a due process. That's the key.
Well, there you
There's
go.
no due process.
I think
That was the heart of the bill.
At the end of the day, every campus has the right, and every campus president has the right to ensure that he has a safe environment for his female students. And that's what this is all
Right.
about. That's how we got to the point where we are right now. And hopefully, at the end of the day, we'll still have that protection. Because if you're a college president, you want to make sure that the women on that campus feel safe and feel safe at that college, or they won't be coming there.
Well,
We all
here's
agree,
an-
but you have
Exactly
to
right.
have due process, wouldn't you
I
agree?
agree.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Here's an idea on that same train of thought. Why not arm them?
Oh dear.
Well,
How's that
campus
campus
carry.
carry bill coming?
There's
How's
the
that
next
campus
one.
carry bill coming?
They're
You
gonna
know,
shoot 'em
I think it's going to pass
Shoot
the House.
first and ask questions
And
later, right?
you know, if you've got a 21-year-old who has passed the, and you're an armed citizen, I admire
I
that. But
am.
why not? If we can save one life, it would be worth it on a campus that has been plagued with crime.
I think that you're right. I think that it probably will pass the House, and I think that the governor will once again veto
Veto
that
it.
legislation,
Right.
as
All right,
he should.
we're running out of
As
time here.
campus presidents are definitely not in favor
So
of
let's
this.
just tick off some measures that are moving. To what end, we don't know. Medical marijuana, with what's included, what's not included, is the main debate there. Campus carry, we mentioned. The House has passed a school turnaround bill, which is kind of vague and not like the constitutional amendment, but it's moving. And I'm told the House is about to redraw their legislative district lines.
That's interesting.
Republicans had some close shaves, and they're going to go tweak.
Both parties have done this in modern Georgia history,
Perfectly legal.
tweaking. I will say, going back to that education reform bill, I don't know why you would call it as vague. It's not as strong as the defeated Amendment 3 last November, but there are some stipulations for turnarounds for failing schools.
Well, vague
Yeah.
in the sense that there's a chief turnaround officer.
Right.
Right.
To whom does he or she report?
Well, that was the big issue. Now it would be going to the state superintendent. Has consultation is the word in the bill, and the state school board.
All right. Any other bills you want to mention? Because I'm getting a hard wave here. All right.
Yeah.
So when we get back, we'll turn our attention to Atlanta City Hall, and I just like doing this. A new, united Atlanta. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
Atlanta mayor Kasim Reed made what was described on one television station as his last appearance ever before the Atlanta Press Club. I think that's an overstatement. First of all, he's got almost a year to complete his term. He's always welcome at the Press Club. And I guess
He
he
only
was,
did it once a year.
well, but he could do it more, especially if the news
But
warrants
why-
it.
why-
And
why-
right now the news does warrant it. At any rate, Kasim Reed was at the top of his game. He was kind of feisty, but he also stressed the accomplishments of his administration. In the meantime, while it's odd, the city is releasing in electronic form all those 1.4 million pages of documents. Kudos to them for that in this age of transparency. But the news keeps coming. And now we have news that Shanderick Barnes, the shady character in all this, who pleaded guilty to throwing bricks and rats into a contractor's front porch, that fellow was working for one Mitzi Bickers while he was on the City Hall payroll and got a job even though he was a convicted felon. It looked like the old Atlanta machine at work there to me, Phil.
Well, I don't know if there's ever been a new Atlanta machine. You're absolutely right. And
Well, it was
there was no vetting. And of
not
course,
true. There was vetting.
well, let me just finish my point. And there's also the spotlight on this Adam Smith, who was the procurement officer for years. He was drummed out of City Hall a couple weeks ago, removed by the administration, the Reed administration. No explanation by Mayor Reed why he was fired all of a sudden. That would have been a nice thing for him to have said at the press club.
Why? Wait a minute. I mean, you
fire
fire a city employee and then you go out and you tell the public why you fired him, and then you subject city taxpayers to the lawsuits that follow
You can
because
say
because you publicly impugned an
That
individual.
sounds like something that
You don't do
Trump
that.
would do.
Yeah, you do.
You don't do that.
You know this.
And
You've
you know
advised,
it.
you
You
advise
know you don't
clients.
do that.
You've advised clients. There's just enough you can say, and you can say if he's,
here's a
he
problem.
was not adhering to
Okay,
city policy.
here's a problem that I have with this. That we're discussing Adam Smith in the same breath with E.R. Mitchell pleading.
Investigation.
Well, by the way,
And I don't know that there's any connection between the two. None of us know
He was
that
the
there's any
procurement
connection.
officer. They're
He
looking at
was
it.
the procurement officer.
That's right.
That doesn't mean there was a connection,
help you.
Phil.
But we're looking at
We're making
procurement.
all kinds of connections that we don't know
I'm telling you who's
Can
targeted.
I help your argument?
I'm telling you who's
If
targeted.
you read the
Please-
subpoena
please
for
do.
Adam Smith, the
Yes.
procurement officer, if you read that subpoena, it's interesting. They're not really looking for things, on the surface anyway, they're not looking for things that are involved in the two contractors who have pleaded guilty. They're looking in a totally different direction. So I think that's why I say this investigation, we argued last week, I said it's just beginning. The subpoena to Adam Smith would indicate it's just beginning. And so I don't know. You've got side stories everywhere. Dale Russell of Fox 5's I-Team, excuse me, when I get excited, I want to, reported that Kasim Reed's father had a recycling company at the airport.
Got
Again, it
millions,
wasn't at the airport.
millions
It wasn't at the airport, number
Millions
one. And
of
number two,
contracts.
again, it has nothing to do with the pleading on the part of E.R. Mitchell and his friend in DeKalb County, C.R. Richards, or C.P. Richards, whatever his name is. These things are not connected. As far as we know, one has nothing to do
But
with
they're
the other.
looking
And we
at
know
bids,
that
Jeff. They're looking at bids. And he just
it
read you the
doesn't
subpoena.
matter what they're looking at. We don't know that these things are connected. All I ask, as I did a week ago, is that we just hold our fire until we get some information.
Well-
The feds have not charged a single individual with bribery. We do not know that a bribe took place in City Hall. So when we talk about a City Hall scandal, essentially we don't know what we're talking about.
But as observers, as observers and pundits, we've been through a lot of investigations, Jeff, and you know this, that we know who the targets are, and we're informing our audience who the targets are. And yes, I believe that it is expanding.
I think that
Alexis.
they should read the newspaper and they'll see the two guys pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit a bribe.
And you think it's over and done with? You want it closed?
But
and you don't.
Alexis-
I want to wait until
Yeah.
the other shoes drop,
That's
if
right.
they do.
Alexis, it is spreading. When you've got questions being raised about Kasim Reed's father, when you've got the fact that the Adam Smith probe appears to be somewhat separate, when you have the stories almost daily now about inflated prices being paid at City Hall for rock, I want to go into the rock business.
And this E.R.
And
Mitchell,
sell to Atlanta.
This
Well-
E.R. Mitchell obviously talking about what happened and how the bribery occurred in City Hall. That's going to be coming out.
Well, I don't know that he has done that.
Oh, listen,
Thank
I'm
you.
sure
Thank you.
I'm
He's
sure
not.
that if he has half a brain and he is a very
Well,
smart man, he will be talking to the feds.
He is talking to the feds, but we don't know what he's talking about and what he's telling them. So we just have to wait and see what happens and what he says. And I agree with Jeff. I don't see that these three things are necessarily
They don't have anything to
connected.
do with each
And it's
Well,
not
if
happening
you
on a
follow,
daily basis.
if you follow
Dick.
how
It's just-
investigations work, and you all followed the Campbell investigation, you start with the smaller people and you work up. And Jeff, sometimes it does take a
Yeah,
year or two or
exactly
three.
right. And then you go and you start charging people like you did with
Let me
Campbell,
ask you
only to get acquitted by a federal court.
That was your pal Sally Yates.
I want to ask you a
Same
quick
thing
moral
with Burl
question.
Ellis.
Kasim Reed angered me when he went after Tommy Hunter, the Gwinnett County Commissioner. Now look, Tommy Hunter said foolish, stupid things. We know that. But what is the mayor of Atlanta doing, calling the guy's employer and threatening him?
I didn't think that he threatened him. I think that he informed him that this is a problem. This is somebody. This is a city vendor. And what are you going to do about this?
That's not a threat?
What? No, not at all. What are you going to do about this employee? Had they fired that Gwinnett County commissioner, that'd been one thing. But there's no indication that they've done anything. And then you want to go out. Let me tell you what. If I am CEO of DeKalb or mayor of the city of Atlanta, I don't want to do business with that company. I'll say it right here.
By the way,
That's a slippery slope.
well, I don't know. I would
slippery
prefer that
slope.
Kasim Reed keep things political in the realm of politics. He doesn't have to go after the guy's livelihood. And certainly that
His
company,
employer, after that
the employer
remark,
knew full well what
after
its
that
employee
remark,
had done.
The citizens of Gwinnett County ought to go after his livelihood. His employer ought to go after his livelihood. It was a dumb thing to say.
So if he so you don't accept his apology then?
No.
And you just want him.
Oh, yeah, I'll
ruined. You
accept
want him ruined.
I'll accept his apology.
Tarred and
But wait a
feathered.
minute, we're tarring and feathering people who haven't been charged.
So everyone who says a stupid statement,
Okay,
and, you know,
the
everyone who
AJC
says a stupid statement in politics is
did
to be
a
ruined.
front-page story on a woman
We gotta
and
get out.
a full-page jump on someone who has not been charged.
Well, you won't have enough time for all of the people who say stupid
Right.
statements to get them fired, Jeff.
I wish we'd done
Wow.
the city investigation a little more clearly, but I hope our viewers will understand there are lots of sources for this. One last thing as we get out, Morse Diggs of Fox 5 did a really interesting story this week about homeless people camping at the Atlanta airport. I was fascinated by it, and we don't have time to really get into it, but I hope Morse stays with it, and I hope for once the city finally understands homeless bums are not good for business.
Well, it goes to the panhandling. It goes on all over the
Yeah,
city.
well,
It is
the idea-
not being enforced, and get a new ordinance and
And what
enforce
would you
it.
do with the
one
poor
or the
people?
other.
What would you do with
Well,
the
we
homeless
gotta get
people?
out.
What
There's
would
So
you
we
do?
don't
homeless
have time for
shelters, and you need to help them. There's
probably-
no question there.
He probably should.
We don't have time for it. All right, when we come back, we'll get back to the politics of the moment. Remember, we've got a mayor's race, we've got a congressional race, we got fun. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
We've got a lot of early skirmishing going on in the race in the 6th Congressional District. To remind you, that North Atlanta district is a special election. It's a free-for-all. It's Democrats and Republicans all in the same stew, aiming for an April election. The national Republican groups attacked the front-running Democrat for college hijinks. It struck me as somewhat silly. I don't know what. All right, John Ossoff, the Democrat, is young. He's what, 30 years old? And they attacked him for stuff he did in college and where he played Han Solo in a skit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, all right,
So they've raised
Well,
over $1 million
right.
to accuse him of going to college?
When they ought to be going after the
Right.
fact.
Well, accusing him of being immature. Actually, both sides do this. It
they accused him
focuses-
of being an immature college student?
Yes, I know you're shocked at that. I know you're shocked at that.
Think of that.
But
oh my
I
goodness.
think what any consultant will tell you of either party is that you want to focus on your main opponent. Now, what's funny is the other Democrat who's prominent, Ron, is it pronounced Slotin?
Ron Slotin.
He is furious because a lot of the Democrats nationally are giving money to this Ossoff and not to Ron. So, and then when Ossoff does the polling, he leaves out Ron Slotin, so he gets more votes in the polling.
But you know, you
Right.
really ought to be attacking Ossoff on the fact that he's so young, that his claims to being a national security advisor to John Lewis and Hank Johnson are just silly.
Well, that's coming.
Well, I hope, but you know,
That's
neither of those
coming.
two congressmen has a darn thing to do with national security, and thank goodness for that.
Well.
And I mean, it's just kind of silliness.
But Hank is an expert on the island of Guam and its stability.
Don't tilt too
Please,
far.
Yes.
Please.
Don't
the thing
tilt.
is, he has academic expertise because he's a college man.
You know, I love all of this talk about John Ossoff. I think it probably heightens his chances up there. All this national money is flowing in. You all talk about him. You've mentioned him every week for the past 5 or 6 weeks. It's great for his campaign.
Great for his
Well,
campaign.
you know, the old saying is,
live in the district.
the old saying is drive up your opponent's negatives.
All right,
Well,
now,
and the other thing
but
is
on the
there's so
Republican
many, I was
side,
going to say, there's so many on the
Yeah, talk
Republican
about the
side that they're
Republican
going to
side.
knock each other off. But go ahead, please.
but on the Republican side, there's real maneuvering. For example, Judson Hill, the state senator from Cobb, has picked up the endorsement of Nancy Jester. That gives him some lift in the Dunwoody and Brookhaven areas.
Newt Gingrich has endorsed him.
Newt Gingrich has endorsed Judson Hill. Karen Handel has got certain right-to-life endorsements.
And a great name recognition.
That's right. Well, she's got the name recognition of the field. It's interesting, and the Ossoff thing is a
Now,
sideshow.
don't forget Dan Moody, who I think is getting support from perhaps some of the Deal administration
He's getting
folks.
the mainline folks, right?
He's
There
got-
is some
he's got
main
Governor
line. You're
Perdue's
right.
people.
That's
Yeah.
right. So he's a player.
Right.
And then, Jeff, this one's for you as we get out.
Yeah.
The Braves have picked a new spring training home. Good for them. In Sarasota, which is described as Southwest Florida, but it's really South Central West
Yeah, it's
Florida,
more
right?
it's more central.
And golly, Pete, they got another city in the county to go along
Isn't
with
that
spending
amazing?
a lot of
I'll
money
tell
for
you,
them. And
that's amazing.
It
they
is
got
They
this
were down in
pat,
Naples
don't
and they got run out of there.
Naples said, no, we're not going to spend it.
But they found another gullible party. I was going to use another word, but I can't do it on TV.
But in this case, there's not a peep. All the governments involved and the developers all seem to like it. It's not being controversial particularly, and it's a great place for the Braves.
Yeah.
So-
It's America's team, huh?
Oh, I wish we had time to talk about the Braves and Cobb, but I just
In
thought
the
for Jeff.
meantime, they're being sued here by the S&P Fund, Summerhill Mechanicsville Peoplestown, because of over some parking revenue, a dispute over what could be $400,000 and possibly significantly more in unpaid parking revenues to that group.
Would you say 400,000?
$400,000, yes.
Two rookie pitchers. Shut 'em out. Okay. When we come back, winners and losers.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
And I said earlier we were Atlanta United in a new way, and we are. Tonight at Grant Field, Bobby Dodd Stadium, the new soccer franchise, Atlanta United. Arthur Blank's latest thing kicks off. They've sold more than 40,000 tickets to watch guys in shorts run around Grant Field, not tackling each other, not blocking for each other, but playing soccer. And I really think it is fabulous. And Arthur Blank's genius just continues to amaze me. He's selling 40,000 seats to a soccer game in a temporary home.
Wow.
Cool.
good.
All right, Jeff, winners,
Pretty
losers.
good. United Way is my winner. They had their inaugural State of the Children Summit this week, in which they pointed out that there are 500,000 kids in the metro area who are in need of all kinds of things, housing, education. So we got a real problem there. They're asking us to come together to help solve that problem. And so my hat's off to them for doing so. Mayor Reed, I wasn't there at the press conference, but I understand that he gave a tremendous address, so he's my winner. And he has just been giving incredible, phenomenal speeches here recently. And so I'm not surprised that that was one of them. And then my dear friend Lewis Horn, who died at, an attorney, golfer, great guy, died at the young age of 66.
He was a winner. We all knew him.
Yes.
Bond attorney and a good one. All right, how about you, Alexis?
Okay, I'm going to congratulate City Councilman Ivory Young and the historic Vine City District for coming together, bringing folks together to come up with a new 16-acre park that's going to be named the Rodney Cook Senior Park. And it's also going to solve the flooding problem that came about some years ago in that area. So congratulations to them. And then also a new public art installation at Freedom Parkway. It's called Journey to Freedom, Women of the Civil Rights Movement, and it features photography by Sue Ross, Doris Derby, Sheila Turner, and artwork by Lynn Marshall Linier. So
Okay.
congratulations.
It's not the Freedom Parkway, it's the Expressway. Go ahead, Phil.
All right. I do want to make, you had mentioned him, Dale Russell and the Fox 5 I team. They're doing some great stuff on on this procurement and what's going on with sweetheart bids and conflicts of interest within City Hall. So I hope we hear more to come. And you know, my winter, I was back on my old alma mater, University of Georgia, the campus the other day, to the Demosthenian Society. That was the debating society. I once was president when I was there in college. And I got a warm welcome, and it relates to the Georgia gang, because we had liberals and conservatives, everybody in between. They all celebrate free speech. They all debate on everything. They love the Georgia gang. I had some political science majors come up, and they all had their favorites, you know, on the show. But they said, you know, that show celebrates what Demosthenian is all about, free speech.
You know, Demosthenes practiced his speaking with rocks in his mouth.
That's right.
Pleasantly, thank you very much for your
Kind of like Jeff.
society.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, I mentioned Atlanta United as a winner, the brand new sports franchise here in Atlanta, and also today's the time when people watch things run counterclockwise. The car race south of Atlanta, the Quick Trip Folds of Honor, and it's good to see the big loud machines come in here. And this week, there was all this talk about immigration and immigration reform. The president wouldn't have had to say a word if he just suggests doing away with birthright immigration. Dreamers would no longer be a problem. Illegals could be deported. Could all be taken care of.
He saw a pathway
so
for illegals, right?
We have to get out.
He's all over the lot.
See you next week on the Georgia Gang.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.